When the lights at the Fillmore West flickered and the hum of the Hammond organ died into an uncomfortable silence, nobody in the packed hall dared to breathe, let alone speak. Aretha Franklin, the Queen of Soul, stood center stage with her hand raised in the air, a gesture that wasn't asking for silence but demanding it, freezing the air in the room instantly. But what happened in the next 30 seconds wasn't a temper tantrum or a diva moment. It was a collision of fate that would drag a terrified 19-year-old girl from the shadows of the coat check room into the blinding spotlight of music history. By the way, tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? To understand the gravity of this night, you have to understand the atmosphere of 1971. The world was shifting, music was becoming the voice of a revolution, and Aretha Franklin was sitting on a throne that no one else could touch. She wasn't just a singer, she was a force of nature, a woman who carried the weight of the church and the street in every breath she took. This concert at the Fillmore West wasn't just another gig, it was a live recording, a moment meant to be etched into vinyl forever. The stakes were astronomical. The record executives were sweating in their suits, the engineers were praying over their mixing boards, and the crowd was hungry for the kind of transcendence only Aretha could deliver. But backstage, a disaster was unfolding that threatened to derail the entire night before the first note was even sung. Maya Johnson was 19, invisible, and she preferred it that way. She worked the coat check at the Fillmore, a job that paid her in loose change and the occasional glimpse of a celebrity rushing past. Maya had grown up in the pews of a small Baptist church in Oakland, where music wasn't performed. It was felt. She had a voice that her grandmother said could call down the angels. But in the harsh light of the professional music industry, Maya was nobody. She was too shy, too poor, and lacked the sharp elbows needed to shove her way to the front. Every night, she would hum along to the bands playing inside the main hall, her voice a secret she kept hidden under the noise of rustling coats and exchanging claim tickets. But tonight was different. Tonight, the air smelled like electricity and expensive perfume. Tonight, Aretha was in the building. Maya had spent her entire shift trembling with a mix of excitement and dread, just knowing she was in the same zip code as the woman who had defined her understanding of what a voice could do. However, the chaos brewing near the stage door was about to spill over into Maya's quiet world. The crisis was simple but catastrophic. Two of Aretha's backing vocalists, the Sweet Inspirations, had been delayed by a massive accident on the Bay Bridge. They were stuck miles away, and the show was scheduled to start in 20 minutes. The vocal arrangements for this specific set were complex, tight, and non-negotiable. You didn't just wing it with Aretha Franklin. You either hit the harmony with surgical precision, or you didn't sing at all. Enter Marcus Thorne. Thorne was the promoter's representative, a man who saw music as a series of numbers on a ledger. He was tall, sharp-featured, and currently vibrating with a panic that he was trying desperately to mask with aggression. He was pacing the hallway near the coat check, barking into a telephone, his voice echoing off the concrete walls. "I don't care if they have to swim, get them here! We have 3,000 people out there and a recording truck burning tape!" Thorne slammed the receiver down and turned to his assistant, a young man who looked ready to faint. "Cancel the opening numbers. We'll cut the set list. If the girls aren't here, Aretha goes out alone." This was the moment of friction. Aretha Franklin did not cut set lists because of traffic. Aretha Franklin did not compromise the vision. Maya, standing behind her counter, heard this and felt a cold knot in her stomach. She knew the set list. She had memorized every breath, every ad-lib, every harmony from the rehearsals she had secretly listened to through the air vents for the past 2 days. She knew that cutting the opening numbers would ruin the spiritual arc Aretha had planned. It was sacrilege. Without thinking, Driven by a sudden, terrifying surge of adrenaline, Maya stepped out from behind the counter. "You can't cut Spirit in the dark," she said, her voice shaking but audible. "It sets the tone for the whole second side of the album." Marcus Thorne spun around, his eyes narrowing as he looked at the girl in the faded uniform. He looked at her like she was a stain on his expensive suit. "Excuse me? Who are you? Go back to the coats, sweetheart. The grown-ups are talking." It was a dismissal that would have sent most people running back to the shadows. But Maya was fueled by the kind of protective instinct that only true musicians have for the music itself. "I know the parts," she blurted out. "I've been listening to the rehearsals. I know the soprano harmony for Spirit in the Dark and the call and response for Dr. Feelgood. I can fill in until they get here." Thorne laughed. It was a cruel, dry sound. "You? A coat check girl? You think you can just waltz onto the stage with Aretha Franklin because you listen to the radio? This isn't a fairy tale, kid. This is the music business. Get back to work before I have you fired." The tension in the hallway was thick enough to choke on. Thorne turned his back on her, dismissing her existence entirely. But he had made a critical error. He hadn't noticed that the door to the dressing room area had opened, and he certainly hadn't noticed that Aretha Franklin was standing there, wrapped in a fur coat, watching the entire exchange with eyes that missed absolutely nothing. If you love stories like this, where the underdog finds their voice against the odds, make sure you subscribe for new stories. We have so many more legends to explore. Aretha didn't shout. She didn't have to. She simply cleared her throat, a sound that cut through Thorne's bluster like a knife through silk. Thorne froze. He turned slowly, his face transforming from arrogance to obsequious charm in a split second. "Aretha, darling, just a minor hiccup. The girls are delayed, but we're handling it. We'll just trim the—" "I heard you," Aretha said. Her voice was low, smoky, and absolutely terrifying in its calmness. She didn't look at Thorne. She was looking past him, directly at Maya. "You say you know the parts?" Maya felt her knees turn to water. This was it. The Queen was speaking to her. She nodded, unable to find her voice. "Don't nod," Aretha said, stepping closer. The smell of gardenias and rain surrounded her. "Speak. If you want to sing in my band, you have to have a voice. Do you know the bridge to Spirit?" "Yes, ma'am," Maya whispered. "Sing it," Aretha commanded. Right there, in the hallway, under the fluorescent lights, with the smell of stale popcorn and anxiety in the air. Thorne stepped in, his hands raised. "Aretha, please, we don't have time for this. This is unprofessional. She's staff. We can't risk the recording." "Quiet, Marcus," Aretha said, without breaking eye contact with Maya. "I'm listening." Maya closed her eyes. She imagined she was back in her grandmother's kitchen, humming along to the radio. She took a deep breath and let the first note out. It wasn't perfect. It was shaky at first. But as she hit the ascending line of the harmony, something clicked. The fear evaporated, replaced by the music. Her voice was clear, soulful, and possessed a texture that was remarkably similar to the missing background singers. She finished the phrase and opened her eyes. Thorne looked annoyed. The assistant looked impressed. Aretha Franklin just looked at her, her face an unreadable mask. "You're rushing the tempo on the third bar," Aretha said critically. Maya's heart sank. She had failed. "But," Aretha continued, a tiny, almost imperceptible smile touching the corner of her lips, "you have the feel. And the feel is something Marcus here couldn't buy with $1 million. Aretha turned to the sputtering producer. "Get her a gown. She's going on." "Aretha, you cannot be serious!" Thorne exploded, his face turning a shade of crimson. "She's a nobody. If she messes up, we lose the take. We lose money. I absolutely forbid this." Aretha stepped close to Thorne, invading his personal space with the effortless dominance of a woman who had fought for every inch of ground she stood on. "Marcus," she said softly, "you organize the tickets, you count the money. But on that stage, I am the boss, and I say she sings. Now find her address, or you can go out there and sing the soprano part yourself." The confrontation between the artistic vision and the corporate structure was over before it began. Thorne, realizing he was outgunned, signaled furiously to a wardrobe assistant. Maya was whisked away, her head spinning, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. 10 minutes later, Maya stood in the wings of the stage. She was wearing a spare backing vocalist dress that was slightly too long, pinned hastily at the waist. She could hear the roar of the crowd, a sound like a crashing ocean. The band was already out there, the legendary King Curtis on saxophone, tuning up. The reality of what was happening crashed down on her. She wasn't just singing, she was stepping into the inner sanctum of soul. As she walked out onto the stage, the lights blinded her. She found her mark, standing next to the one backing singer who had made it. The musician looked at her with a mix of confusion and pity. "Just watch me," the woman whispered, "and don't trip." Then Aretha walked out. The crowd erupted. It was a wall of sound that physically hit you in the chest. Aretha sat at the piano, adjusted the microphone, and looked back at the vocal line. She caught Maya's eye. It was a brief glance, stern but grounding. "Don't let me down," it said. The concert began. The first few songs were a blur of adrenaline. Maya was running on instinct, her eyes glued to Aretha's hands on the piano keys. She hit her marks. She blended. She didn't trip. But the real test was coming. "Spirit in the Dark," the song that Thorne wanted to cut. The song that required a spiritual conversation between the lead and the background. As the band slowed down into the iconic groove of the song, Aretha began to preach on the keys. The mood in the room shifted from excitement to reverence. This was church now. Aretha began the verse, her voice digging deep into the emotional well of the lyrics. Then came the chorus. Maya stepped up to the microphone. She closed her eyes and poured everything she had into the harmony. She thought about the coat check, the invisibility, the fear, the years of singing to empty rooms. When she opened her mouth, she didn't just sing the notes, she testified. Aretha heard it. She spun around on the piano bench, looking directly at Maya. For a split second, Maya thought she had made a mistake. But Aretha wasn't scowling. She was improvising. She threw a vocal line at Maya, a complex, melismatic run. It was a challenge. "Can you keep up?" Maya didn't think. She responded, mimicking the run but adding her own lower harmony to it. The crowd went wild. They sensed the energy, the spontaneous combustion of talent happening in real time. They didn't know Maya was a coat check girl. They just saw two women speaking a language that didn't need words. But the true climax of the night wasn't just the singing. It was what happened during the bridge. The microphone stand Maya was using, old and worn, suddenly slipped. The boom arm swung down, threatening to cut her off completely mid-note. In the wings, Marcus Thorne threw his hands up, vindicated. "See," he yelled, to no one. "Amateur hour." Maya saw the mic drop. Panic flared, but before she could scramble to catch it, Aretha was there. She had stood up from the piano, walked across the stage in 3 strides, and grabbed the microphone stand with one hand, yanking it back up to Maya's level. She didn't stop singing. She didn't break the flow. She held the stand there, physically supporting the young girl, her other hand raised to the heavens as she belted out the climax of the song. It was a visual that became legendary. The Queen of Soul serving her subject, ensuring that the voice was heard. It was a display of leadership that transcended music. It said, "We rise together." When the song ended, the applause was deafening. It felt like the roof of the Fillmore was going to lift off and float into the San Francisco Bay. Aretha stood panting, sweat glistening on her forehead. She looked at Maya, who was shaking, tears streaming down her face. Aretha leaned into her microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, her voice booming, "give it up for Miss Maya Johnson. She was checking your coats an hour ago, and now she's stealing the show." The crowd lost their minds. The validation from the Queen was the ultimate seal of approval. Maya bowed awkwardly, beautifully, her life cleaving into two distinct parts, before Aretha and after Aretha. But the story doesn't end when the curtain falls. That's usually where the real work begins. If you want to know what happens after the applause dies down, subscribe for new stories and stay with us. Backstage, the atmosphere had changed completely. Marcus Thorne was nowhere to be seen, having retreated to his office to count the receipts and nurse his bruised ego. The dressing room was a flurry of towels, water bottles, and congratulations. But Aretha sat quietly at her vanity, wiping off her makeup. She summoned Maya over. The young girl approached, still buzzing with the residual energy of the performance. "You did good," Aretha said, looking at Maya through the mirror. "You didn't rush the tempo that time." "Thank you, Ms. Franklin," Maya stammered. "Thank you for saving me with the mic stand." Aretha turned around. The diva mask was gone, replaced by the tired, wise face of a woman who had seen everything the world could throw at her. "I didn't save you, child. I just held the door open. You walked through it. But listen to me closely." Aretha's expression grew serious. "What happened tonight? That's the easy part. Adrenaline is cheap. The hard part is doing it again tomorrow, and the day after, when the crowd isn't cheering, when the suits like Marcus are telling you you're too loud, or too black, or too opinionated. That's when you have to sing the loudest. Do you understand?" "I think so," Maya said. "You have a gift," Aretha said, reaching out to squeeze Maya's hand. "Protect it. Don't let them polish the soul out of you. Marcus and his type, they want perfection. But people don't listen to music for perfection. They listen for connection. You connected tonight. Never forget the difference." It was a lesson Maya would carry for the rest of her life. It wasn't about hitting the high C. It was about why you hit the high C. Maya didn't go back to the coat check. The next day, at Aretha's insistence, she was hired as a permanent backing vocalist for the remainder of the tour. It wasn't an easy road. The industry was brutal, just as Aretha had warned. There were lonely nights in cheap motels, grueling bus rides, and producers who tried to mold her into something she wasn't. But every time Maya felt her resolve slipping, she remembered the weight of Aretha's hand on that microphone stand, the physical manifestation of support. Years later, Maya Johnson would become a sought-after vocal arranger, working with some of the biggest names in R&B and gospel. She wasn't famous in the way Aretha was. Nobody was. But she built a life of dignity and art. She often told the story of that night at the Fillmore, not to brag, but to teach the young singers she mentored. The conflict between Maya and Marcus Thorne that night was never really about a missing singer. It was a conflict between two ways of viewing the world. Thorne saw a problem to be managed, a risk to be mitigated. He saw a hierarchy where coat check girls stayed in the lobby. Aretha saw potential. She saw a spirit that needed release. She operated on the logic of the church, where the humblest person in the room might be the vessel for the greatest blessing. This story is a reminder that leadership isn't about standing in the front and barking orders. It's about recognizing the quiet talent in the back of the room and giving it a platform. Aretha Franklin didn't need Maya to make the concert a success. Aretha could have sung the phone book and received a standing ovation. She brought Maya up because she understood that her legacy wasn't just her own voice, it was the voices she inspired. We often think of legends as untouchable, distant figures, but the true measure of a legend is how they treat the invisible people around them. Aretha Franklin, the Queen of Soul, proved that her royalty wasn't in her crown, but in her capacity to lift others. As for Marcus Thorne, he kept his job, kept counting his money, but he never quite understood what happened that night. He spent his career looking for the next big thing, never realizing he had tried to silence it in a hallway. He missed the magic because he was too busy looking at his watch. But the truly shocking part was still ahead. Decades later, after Aretha had passed, a recording of that specific Fillmore concert was re-released from the archives. In the liner notes, there was a small, grainy photo of a young girl in an ill-fitting dress, singing her heart out next to the Queen. And listed in the credits, for the first time properly, was the name, Maya Johnson. Additional vocals. It was a final nod from the Queen, reaching out from beyond to ensure credit was given where it was due. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? How many voices are silencing themselves right now because they think they don't belong on the stage? How many Marcus Thornes are blocking the doorway? And how many of us are brave enough to step out from behind the counter when the moment comes? If this story of courage, soul, and the power of a single opportunity moved you, subscribe for new stories. We are building a community here that celebrates the moments that change lives. Aretha Franklin's music taught us to feel, but her life teaches us to be brave. It teaches us that respect isn't just a song title, it's an action. It's the act of listening to someone who has no status and hearing the melody in their heart. Before we wrap up, I want to ask you one more thing. Subscribe for new stories and hit that like button if you believe that talent can come from anywhere. Share this with someone who needs a push to chase their own dream. Maybe they are just one yes away from their own Fillmore moment. Maya Johnson took the leap. Aretha held the door. And the music was better for it. Until next time, keep listening to the soul of the world. Subscribe for new stories so you never miss a beat.